Let's go live to the US now, and joining me is Republican strategist John Jordan, amongst many other things. John, how are you?
Good to be back.
Yeah, good to talk to you. What do you make of this whole Chinese balloon story?
Well, it's complicated because there's so much we don't know, and I'm the first person on here and other programs to harsh on the Biden administration when I think they have it coming. But I think in this case, they probably did the right thing, and it probably was responsibly handled. The intelligence community doesn't want the Chinese to know when we detected it or what our capabilities are in that regard, and they probably isolated the balloon by jamming as it traversed the United States, and it was an opportunity to observe this spycraft in operation, and they wanted to see what it could do before they shot it down and tried to put it back together. So I think President Biden in this case may well end up being correct, but unfortunately, everything is politicized in this country now.
Do you think it's heightened things between the US and China, or was that overhyped?
Well, nothing. I mean, it's bad and getting worse with China. Look, this is part of a broad spectrum program they had to collect intelligence throughout the world. And it's not just the United States. And they're willing to violate international convention and law to do so. And so this, I think, points to the malignancy of the Chinese Communist Party and what their intentions really are. And I think now the public is waking up to that now. It's no longer a sleeping giant where people don't see China as a threat, because now in a very vivid way, it's almost a Sputnik moment, like when the Russians built the satellite Sputnik and circled it around the world. It really got people's attention, and I think this may backfire on the Chinese in that way.
President Biden did pretty well at the State of the Union.
No, he didn't, actually. So
why does it surprise me that you were going to say that?
No, so we're going to go through some numbers on that. First of all, viewership of the State of the Union was off 29% off of last year. Surveys, these are American media surveys by generally left-leaning media outlets. 78% of America does not want Biden to run again, including 62% of Democrats. Okay, so fine, he held it together for an hour and 13 minutes on the stage and delivered a speech. But that's a pretty low bar. So if you're looking in terms of beating the expectations hurdle, yeah, he did that. But you look at where he is in that race and what even Democrats want, it's not so good. Even Democrat-leaning publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, The Hill, and so forth are starting to come down on Joe Biden and suggest he not run again. So if you look at the fact that maybe if your standard is he held it together for an hour and 13 minutes and was cogent, yeah, I guess he had a good night. That's a low bar indeed.
I thought he handled those hecklers okay, though.
Yeah, but he was briefed for that, and so he handled the hecklers pretty well, but he did, in fact, lie about them. So he knew that, but it was kind of a trap that his speechwriters put in there. He made a false statement about Republicans wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare. He knew there would be a reaction from a couple of members, the more festive members of the Republican caucus, and he wanted to have that TV moment. So it was scripted.
All right, now what about Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the Republican response?
Well, what you're seeing here is kind of an interesting, something that hasn't happened in a long time, over a century in American politics, and that is you have a former president who is thinking about running for office again. Now, an incumbent president pretty much has almost a right to the nomination, not nominally, but they kind of do, practically speaking. But a former president doesn't enjoy that. But President Trump, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was his former White House press secretary, and President Trump has them loyalists throughout the Republican Party. But what you're seeing now is the opening salvos in the 2024 Republican presidential nomination race. And it's unlike any we've had before, because normally it's either an incumbent president running or it's an open race. So here you're going to have, I think, seeing the beginning of the silly season on the Republican side, where people are running but not running, and it's all very vague, and you have a former president cast over it. The silly season on the Democrat side is going to begin if President Biden announces that he's not going to run again, and then you're going to have a lot of people jockeying for position. But a lot of the insiders in the Democrat Party, including in the media, don't want President Biden to run again. So it's going to be a fun year and a half to watch this play out.
It's certainly going to be interesting, that's for sure. And Donald Trump, after the midterms, looked dead and gone politically, but he's Teflon-like, isn't he? He looks like he's in a lot better shape than he was back then.
Well, President Trump surviving here because a lot of what he's been, first of all, the Biden administration is a failure. Americans aren't happy with him. He's underwater with approval, and he's 80 years old, and nobody's really excited about him running. And President Trump's kind of been validated. I mean, the Russia collusion hoax was debunked. Now politicization in the FBI is coming out. Now it's even Twitter's admitting that they suppressed and censored the Hunter Biden laptop story and a lot of his criminal wrongdoings. So President Trump is benefiting from the fact that even though he's at best a colorful personality and at worst a jackass, he's benefiting from the fact that a lot of what was done to him is being exposed. So it's vindication in spite of what President Trump says.
All right, what about Kevin McCarthy? He met for an hour this week with Joe Biden. It was said to be a fairly positive discussion, but there's a lot going on, isn't there, in and around the economy, in and around Medicare, in and around Social Security?
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy has, I think, the worst job in the world. He's Speaker with a very thin majority, so he doesn't have a lot of votes to spare and doesn't have a lot of leverage with his own caucus. But he's doing a good job in messaging on this. You're seeing a real shift in American public opinion compared to when we had these last fights with the Obama administration, 2011. Which the Democrats are using as a template. Americans are now concerned about debt and deficit spending in a way they weren't before. And that strengthens McCarthy's hand somewhat because Americans do want this corrected and they don't want the economy thrown into the free fall because the Democrats want to stick by their guns on spending. And that's forcing Joe Biden to back off we're not going to negotiate stance. So, yeah, they are negotiating. They are quiet. And each one of them is trying to kind of give the other one an off-ramp or an easy way to negotiate so that a deal can be struck. So no promises, no guarantees, but the signs are promising.
Finally, the fallout between Mitt Romney and George Santos?
Yeah, I don't know who to root for on this one, right? I mean, George Santos is obviously a fraud and a weirdo. But then, Mitt Romney, he's kind of no prize either. He was governor of Massachusetts, ran for president, didn't win, and then he had to move all the way across the country to run for a Senate in a state that he's not from, so he can become relevant again. And Mitt Romney loves to be relevant and wants to grandstand and moralize a lot. And he's done that even before the George Santos thing. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a race of the moral cripples.
All righty. Well, I'll write that one down. That's not a bad one-liner. John, always good to chat. Let's try and do it again next week.